The Atari 2600 has awesome games, and plenty of them. Its joystick is effective. Graphically, it is quite weak, but clever design and coding overcomes this. Yet, in 1979, a more advanced console named the Intellivision came out. The Intellivision has some solid titles, but a ridiculous controller with that disc thing instead of a joystick and that number pad. Ugh. But Atari worried that they'd lose out to this new competition, and soon released the 5200. It is a similar controller to the Intellivision. The thing is awkward, unreliable, and is designed in a way where hitting the number pad means you can't hit the action buttons. So the system flopped, as it deserved. Atari tried again with the 7800. This system is better, more powerful, backwards compatible to 2600, and has a better, if still flawed, joystick. Unless you live in Europe, in which case you got this awesome pad. In any case, the system made a profit, but barely any software ever came out in the 7800's lifetime. Atari next tried to compete with the Game Boy, via the Lynx. The Lynx had far superior hardware, but it cost more, had an inferior library, and weak battery life. Thus the Lynx hissed and hollered its way to an early grave. In the early 90s, however, Atari decided to try one last time to make it in the console industry. Would they learn from past mistakes, or simply repeat them? The Jaguar was launched in 1993, when the 16-bit Super Nintendo and Genesis were king. I couldn't have cared less at the time. "The Jaguar is 64-bit!" screamed Atari. "Really? 64-bit?" Who cares? You'd think Atari would realize how little technological superiority can mean in the video game industry. The Atari 2600 dominated over the Intellivision, ColecoVision, Vectrex, and even its own successors, all machines with far more horsepower. At the time, what I cared about were the launch and early titles. They sucked. Anyways, for a reason I'll get to later, I ended up getting a Jaguar one Christmas. And here it is. Fairly basic, okay looks, standard 2 controller ports, big red power button, no reset button, but that's okay. Every Jaguar game has a built-in function to reset the game from the controller. Nice feature. The back reveals, oh my god, did a big panel fall off, or did something break apart in the back, exposing the guts inside? No, that's the way it's supposed to be. Just raw circuit ends for connectors. Some might call them good enough, as they do work. I call it lazy design. I actually thought the thing had something wrong with it when I first saw this way back in 1994 when I first got my Jaguar. Aside from that boneheaded touch, the other standards are there. Power, RF connectors, the top shows the cartridge slot, which has no covering at all. System is quite reliable on the whole, as almost any cartridge system is. Sometimes I do have to pop the game in and out a few times to get it to work though. Been like that pretty much since I got it brand new as a kid. One smart feature I've never seen in another cartridge system. If you hit the power button without a cartridge in it, which is supposedly bad for the system, it won't turn on at all. A cartridge has to be present for the LED light indicating power to even work. That's pretty smart. The Jaguar is most infamous for its controller. Here it is. 3 action buttons, a D-pad, pause, and option. Oh yeah, and that stupid phone pad. There are little spots to stick on these little insert overlays so that you can see what each of these many buttons do. And that's exactly the problem. You have to look. Nothing takes you out of gameplay more than having to refer to random things that aren't on screen. It's just distracting, and in action games will get you killed. Speaking of games, the pack-in title on the Jaguar was a game called Cybermorph. Cybermorph is a free-roaming 3D shooter. You fly around blasting enemies and collecting yellow orbs. When you have enough orbs, you can enter a portal and proceed to the next level. There are 50 levels total. It is nice to be able to roam around, but the overall game is just bland. The graphics are the starting point. They're dull colors with no texture work. The 2D sprites for weapons are mediocre, explosions are fiery but kind of small and quick, and the frame rate's pretty low. Compared to Star Fox, probably the most famous 3D game of the time, which was still fairly new then. Star Fox has brighter colors, a higher frame rate, much faster pacing, and great music. Yeah, that's another thing about Cybermorph. No music during gameplay, which is too bad since the title tune is pretty good. Listen. Yeah, nice, huh? Why not get that composer to write some more stuff for the game? Moving on though, basic controls are functional. D-pad steers the ship, though it is a bit touchy. C is brake and reverse. B fires your main gun, and A accelerates. Pause pauses, and option switches main weapons. Buttons 1, 2, and 3 fire super weapons, and the other buttons switch angles. Another element worth noting is Skylar. She's this annoying green bitch who comments on what you're doing. It's supposed to be helpful, but is actually just very annoying. You can mute her, and you should. Otherwise, you'll get this.
Where did you learn to fly? 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 Where did you learn to fly?
That's really all there is to say. You fly around, everything moves slow, and the frame rate's sluggish. Cybermorph isn't really a terrible game. It is playable. It's just kind of dull and mediocre. Another launch, or near-launch, title is Dino Dudes. I got this as a bonus game. It wasn't actually a pack-in, but all I had to do was mail in a UPC code for my Jaguar box, and it came a few weeks later. The basic gameplay is somewhat similar to Lemmings, only you actually control your little cavemen. You generally have some basic goal, often reaching an exit platform. You must throw spears, pole vault, kill dinosaurs, and so on to progress. So it is sort of an action puzzle game. The action elements play in when you try to do certain actions. A bar pops up, and some timing is involved. You may notice this game bears an uncanny resemblance to The Humans, which came out on the Super Nintendo and Genesis. That's because they're the same game. That's right, one of the Jaguar launch titles is a port of a 16-bit game already over a year old. Not only that, the Genesis version had animated cutscenes, and this version doesn't. But, on the other hand, the Jaguar version has music. Quite good music, actually, during gameplay, and the Genesis version does not. So at least the Jaguar version is superior on that note. I believe there are some minor level differences as well, but they're still essentially the same game. The game is decent if you like puzzle games. Nothing spectacular, and just not really my kind of game. But hey, the music is pretty kickin'. I never liked normal sports games, but somehow the violent sports titles like Mutant League Football, Pigskin Foot Brawl, and Base Wars appealed to me. Thus I ended up with Brutal Sports Football. This title is exclusive to the Jaguar and console systems, and it's not a bad game. The sports in the game plays like a combination of soccer, American football, and rugby. In terms of the actual scoring gameplay, it's very basic and simplistic. There are no advanced plays or anything, and little variety in scoring technique. However, this does not take away from the game's charm. What makes the game fun is the ability to beat the crap out of your opponents, and of course, the alternate win condition. If you can't ever score against the computer, just kick the ball straight up and stab him with the swords laying around on the field, then stomp angrily all over his body. Eventually his head pops off and the team member's dead. And these corpses and severed heads stay on the field. You can even pick them up and kick them across the field if you want to. It's just too bad you can't use the severed heads as weapons. That would have been awesome. But yeah, if you kill enough players in the other team, you win. If only the current Madden games would introduce swords and the ability to stomp the hell out of Peyton Manning until his head pops off, I'd play them too. Brutal Sports Football tries to have some depth through a minor team healing system where you can restore dead and injured teammates throughout the playoffs. However, the game never really rises above its basic beat-em-up sports gameplay. But for short bursts, the game is actually fun and quite amusing. I imagine it would be even better two-player, but I only have one Jaguar controller. While the game is fun, it does lack the depth and genuine sports playability of the Mutant League series. Still, it's a common Jaguar game, and it's fun. Other than the lack of depth, my one major complaint. Later on in the playoffs, you play against lizard men and even rhino men, but there's absolutely no way to play as these non-human teams. I mean, seriously, who wants to play as boring old humans when there are lizard men running about? I always pick the all-alien psycho slashers in Mutant League Football for a reason. They're friggin' badass and they look cool, but there's no option like this in Brutal Sports Football, and it makes me very, very sad. All in all, this is one forgotten game that's actually worth revisiting.